Everybody, how is it going? Disastles finally has all of its artwork finished, and it's now available on Tabletop Simulator. I just published it. If you want to play the game, you can just go on Tabletop Simulator and play it for free. One of the problems, though, is that currently we're still in the process of doing the last few iterations of the rulebook and making the rulebook look all pretty. And that's not quite done yet. So currently, the tabletop sim version of Disastles does not have a rulebook. So I want to be your rulebook, essentially. And also kind of show off a little bit of our art and all of that stuff. Show you what we have added into the game. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. And yeah. Anyway, so I want to quickly take you through that, and then I hope that maybe you can give it a shot. If you do want to play it, the link is down below. Tabletop Sim is sadly not free. You do have to buy Tabletop Sim, but if you do have Tabletop Sim, it is free. It is free to play Disastles. Like, doesn't cost anything. Hopefully soon we're also going to have the browser-based version, although that is still probably a few weeks away. Anyway, let's get into it. So, we have got 12 disasters, all of which have unique artwork. We have 12 catastrophes, all of which have unique artwork. Well, actually, we have 13 catastrophes because we added in one additional one just because I kind of thought that would be a fun card to have right here, the 13th seal. Then, of course, we have 10 throne rooms, again, all of which have unique artwork. And we have 100 unique playing cards, right? So, when I say unique playing cards, I don't mean that all of the effects are unique. Some cards are in there twice or 3 times, or possibly even 4 times. That would have been nice if there was the 4th one, but oh well. But they all still have unique artwork. So you can see that this mercenary and this mercenary and this mercenary, even though they all have the same effect, they all look very different, and they all have really nice, awesome artwork. So how does the game work? Well, the game is actually fairly simple, right? Let me go ahead and group all of this back together, and then we can go ahead and group all of this really quick. So, you play the game with 2 to 5 players. It's probably going to take you between 20 to 50 minutes. It really comes down to how experienced your players are and how quickly they play. So I have had moments where a player took 15 minutes to take a single turn. That is not normal. That isn't really something you can expect, but it does happen. I've also had moments where, it was going super quick, everybody was playing really fast, and then the game was over in 20 minutes, right? So it kind of depends on your group and how experienced they are, and also actually, like how much they like to think about every single turn. So you kind of have to make your own judgment call there. But you start the game by taking a throne room. Right? Every player gets one of the throne rooms. Now, throne rooms are double printed. So there's one side of the throne room that doesn't have any text, that only has artwork. And the other side of the throne room does have text and, of course, the artwork. But they all look the same. Otherwise, they are not functionally the same, though. And when you start the game for the first time, I very much recommend you only play with the throne rooms like this and not with the text version. The text version is a little bit more advanced. That's something I recommend if you have already played like 2 or 3 games. Right? Another thing I very much recommend is that you do not mix and match non-text and text throne rooms, right? If you play with the text version of the throne rooms, all players should play with the text versions of the throne rooms. While if you're playing with the non-text versions of the throne rooms, all players should play with the non-text versions of the throne rooms. That's just because the text versions are strictly speaking better, because they have the same connection points, but they all come with an upside, with an advantage, right? And you want to be able to use that. Anyway, so let's go ahead and lay out the shop. The shop is the first important thing you need to know about Disastles. So every round you will lay out 5 cards like this. And this is what we call the shop, right? Then players will take turns taking cards from the shop. This goes around the table. So let's assume I'm not on my own and lonely right here, but we've got 3 players, so it's us 3. It's not just me. one of the players gets to start. And they get the I get to go first card. And with the I get to go first card comes a lot of responsibility, as in you get to go first. So you get to go into the shop and pick one of these cards and place it into your castle. So let's say I want to take the Watchtower because the Watchtower has beautiful, gorgeous, fantastic art. I place it into my castle. And then the next player is, then it's the next player's turn, and they place something in their castle, and they place something in their castle. Right? There we go. Afterwards, we discard all of the cards from the shop. Restock the shop with 5 new cards, like this. And then this gets passed to the next player. And now this player gets to go first. So let's say they want to put this down, and then this player up here wants to put this card down, and then it's my turn, and I want the petting zoo. Awesome. And then this, then the shop gets discarded again, right? And then this passes to the next player, and we lay out a new shop. And you just go through it like this every single round. All right, awesome. Now, I have already built some stuff in my castle. Let me explain how to build things in your castle. Right? First of all, there are these connection points right here. These circles, these are called connection points. There are 2 types of connection points. There are golden connection points, and then there are normal connection points. To place a card in your castle, you don't have to match connection points. You don't. It's very important that you keep that in mind, right? So for example, I could take this card right here and place it up here, right? I do have to match connection points in terms of placing a connection point to another connection point. Right, so you can only ever do something like this. I cannot do this because there is no connection point here. There's no connection point here, but there is one here. This is not allowed, and you're never allowed to do this. If at any point during the game, if at any point while playing the game, you find yourself in a situation where this happens, you made a mistake. This is not allowed ever, right? But what is important to keep in mind is that the symbols within the connection points, so you can see this is a square, this is a moon, these do not have to match for you to be able to place a card. So I can do this, or I could, for example, do something like place this here and then place this here. This is all fine. I am allowed to do this. It's not necessarily optimal, but it is allowed, right? So that's important to keep in mind. The throne room is a little bit special, as in the throne room will adjust its connection point to be whatever this connection point is. Now, there are benefits to matching connection points though. First of all, you can see that this card has a golden connection point and a regular one. This card too has a golden connection point and a regular one. Both of these cards also have text, right? So this right here says, Link, look at the top 5 cards of the deck, discard any, put the rest back on top. And this right here says, connected rooms can't be manipulated. So if I now place this card down, and let's say hypothetically I were to place this card like this, then it is currently considered to not have any text. Because for a card to be, for a card's text to become active and for a card to be considered to have text, it needs to, like all of the symbols that are golden on the card need to be matched with the right symbols. So let's say hypothetically I were to place this here, right? I place my hallway here. You can see this is a cross connection point. This is a moon connection point. This does not activate the card. I need to place a moon here, right? If I don't place a moon here, so something I can do is, for example, I place this entropic vault. Now this card's text becomes active. But if I place this over here, then it isn't active because I did not place a moon here. However, this is also important to keep in mind. What I may do is I may do this, right? Place this card here and then have this matching. So again, throne room always matches whatever you lay next to it. So right now this is considered to also be a moon. So this right here is matching. This right here isn't. But since the card text becomes active, as long as all of the golden connection points are matching, this is fine. You're allowed to do this. This petting zoo is now active. Its effect is now ongoing. Cool. All right, that makes sense. Connected rooms always means this right here. This is a connected room. Cool. Awesome. There are some keywords in the game. We don't have that many because this is the base set and we wanted to keep it simple. But one of the very important keywords is link. How does a link work? A link is a one-time effect that becomes active when you properly match all of the golden connections on a card. So if I now draw this watchtower and I place it into my castle like this, it will immediately become active because you can see I'm matching this golden connection here. Cool. So now the effect becomes active. Link means it activates once and then it's over, right? It's just done. It is now over. The link is active. So I can now go ahead and use that effect. So I can look at the top 5 cards of the deck and discard any and put the rest back on top. Awesome, right? So I can use this if I see, like I can use this to check the top of the deck and see if there's anything I want to get rid of, anything that I feel like maybe I don't want to give to another player. There are other keywords as well. So for example, this card right here is an action card. If I place this card right here, I cannot use this action because I don't have a matching connection, right? But if I were to place this card here, and this card didn't exist, because if, again, keep in mind, if I do this, this is not allowed. You're not allowed to do this. This is not a legal placement. But if I place this card right here, then I can now use the action. So what does an action do? Well, an action takes your turn. On your turn, you may do one of two things. You may either play a card from the shop or you may take an action, right? So taking an action can be one of 3 different things. Either you can swap 2 of your rooms as long as placement rules are still being respected. So for example, if I had my castle kind of look like this, I could say, okay, I want to swap 2 of my rooms. I want to swap these 2. Not necessarily a great play, but I can do it. So I can swap 2 of my rooms or I can move an outer room. An outer room is a room that only has one active connection with another room. So for example, this watchtower, even though it has 2 connection points, only one of them is active, as in is actually being connected to something else. So this would be considered an outer room, while the petting zoo and the throne room are not outer rooms. So I can now say I want to move this watchtower to another outer location. So I can say, okay, I want to move it down here. Cool, awesome. That's something I'm allowed to do. Quick side note. In this scenario right here, if I actually take an action to swap these 2 rooms, and I had previously already used this link, then both of these cards essentially get disconnected from your castle for a second and get reconnected. Meaning that in this moment, this watchtower actually reactivates and the link can be used again. So you can actually repeatedly use links as long as you make an effort to disconnect the links from your castle and then reconnect them properly at a different point. It is important to keep in mind though that you may never use more than 5 link effects a turn. It is possible to create infinite link chains, but it is not allowed. 5 at most. Alright? Cool. So instead of doing a move or a swap, I can also use an action room. So I can, for example, use a divination chamber that says, look at the top 5 cards of the deck, play one, put the others back on top. So I can kind of take a look at a different shop and draw a card from there if I want to, right? So action effects are really powerful. But keep in mind, when you're using an action, you may not play a card from the shop. It's always one or the other, right? You may never use an action and playing a card from the shop in the same turn, unless you have a card that specifically says so, right? So there's, for example, the mercenaries we had talked about earlier that have some effects that allow you to take additional actions. That is fine, but that is a specific card. So let's actually set up a proper game. So how do you start out with playing Disastles? Well, first of all, you go ahead and get all of these cards. There's 100 room cards. And we're going to go ahead and group them all up, put them back up here. Oh, one quick thing. There are passive effects as well, right? So let me see if I can actually find a passive. So this right here is a passive. So we had actions and links. And this right here is a so-called passive. It is not marked by a keyword, but it does mean that, that just means that the effect is continuous, right? It's always going on and it's just happening. Hey, Blocks, thank you so much for the sub. But this is just an effect that is continuous, that is always going on. You don't have to worry about it. It's just always happening. Cool. Awesome. So let me go ahead and take all of this and shuffle it into the pile, right? And then we have some more cards over here. We want to put them back in there as well. So we have Disasters. This right here is a disaster. This is the Nebula Drake. You can see it does an X damage, an X square damage, 2 cross damage, and an X moon damage. What does this mean? Well, at the start of the game, we're going to take off about 15 cards from the deck, right? So 16 is fine. So we're going to go and split the deck, and we take off 16 cards, and then we shuffle in 6 disasters, ideally at random, right? You don't want to select it ahead of time, you just want to do it at random. So we're going to go in and take these 6 disasters and shuffle them into this deck. And now they have vanished. Whenever a disaster is drawn, it is immediately played. There's no way to play a disaster to not play a disaster when it is drawn. That includes discarding, right? So, for example, there are cards that you discard cards from the deck. Even when a disaster is discarded, it is still played. You cannot prevent a disaster from being played. So, what happens when a disaster is played? So, let's say we go through a few turns. Raddy-buddy-da. We play a little bit, we build up a little bit of a castle. Right? We go ahead and do all of this stuff. Now, something that's also important to keep in mind about placement, by the way, you always have to place the cards upright like this, right? You may not rotate cards on their own. I actually cannot play that card. Yeah, my castle right now is not necessarily the world's most beautiful, well-built castle. But it is important to keep in mind you're not allowed to rotate rooms just on their own. That's not something you can do, right? So, for example, I always have to place this card like this. I cannot place it like this, even though that may be better for me. Not allowed to. But there are cards in the game that let you rotate rooms, right? There are some cards, I'm sure we can find one without much of a hassle. They are not all that rare. Well, maybe not. Doomsayers, by the way, like beautiful card. Love Doomsayer. Oh, hey, we got the first disaster. All right, we'll deal with that in just a second. Oh, come on. Well, apparently I am just showing all of the artwork off right now. That seems fine. Okay. Well, I'm sure you can't believe me when I say there are cards that let you rotate rooms. Well, yeah, we're definitely just taking a tour through the deck right now. I mean, look at all of the beautiful artwork, though. I mean, here we go. Rotate.
Hey, wow, me. My friends at uni love card games, and I think they're going to love this. Can't wait to get my hands on it.
Hey, thank you, dude. I appreciate that. All right, so this right here is, for example, link rotate a room. So let's say I link this, right? So that means I need to play another card right here. Now I can rotate a room in my castle. What is important to keep in mind is that you still have to respect placement rules. You cannot rotate a room like, for example, I couldn't do this now, right? I cannot say I want to play it like this because that means that this doesn't line up properly. There's no connection point here. You still have to respect placement rules. You always have to respect placement rules. All right, so we've got a little bit of a castle now. Awesome, right? Rotating, by the way, also means you can rotate it in any 90-degree way. You also can say, I don't want to rotate. Like, that's fine. So we drew an Aurora Whale. So it does 1 plus X square damage, 0 cross damage, and 1 plus X moon damage. Meaning it does 1 plus, and the X always means 1 damage per previous disaster played. Right, so since it's the first disaster played, it simply does 1 square damage and 1 moon damage. How do we reduce that? We reduce that by having fitting connections in our castle. So you can see right now we actually have 2 moon connections, because keep in mind, the throne room adjusts. So this right here is 2 moons. And this right here is 1 square, so we would actually not take any damage. So let's see if we can find the next disaster that is in the deck. It should be coming sometime soon. All right, keep in mind there's 6 of them in the deck. They show up relatively frequently. Something that's pretty neat about this game is if you want to increase the difficulty, right, you want to have a more difficult game, you can just add in more disasters. So this right here is the Warp Storm. It does 0 square damage, 1 plus X cross damage, and 1 plus X moon damage. So in our example, since this is the second disaster played, it now does 2 X damage and 2 moon damage. So let's look at our castle. There's 1 X connection, there's another one, and then we have there's a moon, and there's another moon. There's actually another X, so it's cool. They block all of the damage, and we're fine. Still don't take any. Well, let's see if that stays that way. Ooh, it's starting to get a little bit dangerous, you know. There's another disaster coming, and keep in mind, they always get more dangerous every single time. So they are the space bees. So this one, oh, there's actually an arrow there. It says +1. Jeremy! Oh, yeah. So that should just say 1, right? But don't worry about it. It's not too big of a deal. But anyway, it does 1 square damage. Then it does 1 plus X cross damage and X moon damage. Or in other words, it does 1 square, 3 cross, and 2 moon. So we just checked. We do actually have exactly that, right? We have 1 square, we have 1, 2, 3 X's, and then 2 moons. Awesome. That was kind of lucky that lined up perfectly like that. But, you know, sometimes you get lucky. That's just how it goes. So there is the Aurora Veil. This is gonna be a little bit trickier. 2 square damage. Well, we don't have 2 squares. We know that. We only have 1. Right? And then, how much is that? 3 X and 3 moons. Well, we have 3 X's, but we only have 2 moons. So I do now take 2 damage. Once you take damage, it becomes indiscriminate. It doesn't matter what kind of damage you take. You always just take damage. It's all the same. And once you take damage, what you have to do is you have to discard cards out of your castle. So I have to say, okay, well, I gotta discard 2 outer rooms now. So I can say I want to discard this one. And by discarding this one also becomes an outer room. So I can also choose to discard this. All right, but now I lost 2 rooms. You know, and then there are more disasters coming, and they are just getting more and more dangerous. So you gotta be always aware of what's happening. Right? You always gotta be fearful and gotta make sure you're well prepared. Don't play too greedy. So this one right here does 1 square, and then how much? Ooh, 4 X and 5 moon damage. Yeah, I cannot take that at all. I have 2 moon connections and 2 X's, so I take 5 damage. Yeah, that actually destroys everything I have except for the throne room. So I'm strictly speaking still in the game, but just barely. So that's how disasters work. After the 6th disaster has been played, right, there's 6 in the deck. After all 6 of them have been played, the game is over. Now, the game can end sooner than that if all players, or all players but one of them get eliminated. The game is over. Right? If only one player is alive and everybody else is eliminated, game is over and that player wins. If more than one player manages to survive all the way through the 6 disasters, all the way through the deck, then the player with the most treasure in their castle wins. So these are these wards. You can see this is a large ward. It gives you +5 treasure. This is an example of a ward. If you have this in your castle and you have it properly connected, meaning you need to match all of the golden symbols, then you have 5 treasure. And if I am the only one with any treasure after all the disasters have been played, or if I'm the one with the most treasure, then I win the game. If there's a draw on treasure, which can happen, then the player with the most rooms wins. And if there's also a draw there, then the player with the most connections wins. And if there, not most connections, but most complete connections, right? Matching connections. And if there's also a draw there, then it's a draw. But honestly, that's very unlikely. That only ever happened once. But yeah, anyway, so that's Disastles. That's pretty much all of the rules, right? Of course, in the final release of the game, and hopefully in the rulebook that's coming very soon, we're going to have a whole bunch of extra rules, additional play modes, suggestions on how you can increase and decrease the difficulty and all of that stuff. So, for example, one of those suggestions would be shuffling in these catastrophes. Catastrophes are disasters, but they have text on them, right? So they are a little bit more dangerous and they make for a more challenging play experience. If you want it to be a more relaxed game, you can remove disasters, only play with 5. If you want to make it more difficult, add 7, maybe even make it 8. Although at 8 it gets really, really hard. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys give the game a shot, right? Again, link down below, and it is currently on Tabletop Sim.